Hey there, my name is Robert John, and I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of my newsletter as a podcast. I'd like to start out by talking about the company ARM and the 5 ecosystem labs that they recently launched in Ghana. Now, this isn't the first ecosystem lab that ARM is launching on the continent. In 2022, ARM launched an ecosystem lab in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, and that lab is called the CREATECHIVITY Hub. So ARM has had 1 year to get a grip of how things work on the continent. Now, the goal of the ecosystem lab is to provide a space for people to go and get hands-on with embedded systems. ARM itself doesn't manufacture any hardware. In fact, it is the world's largest provider of silicon intellectual property. And really what that means is it licenses the designs and the architectures that go into microcontrollers and microprocessors. Now, for most people, especially in Africa, an ARM component isn't something that you go out and purchase, or a piece of hardware or a microcontroller with ARM written on it isn't something that you really go out and purchase. Instead, what you purchase is something from a company. It could be ST Micro, it could be Arduino, it could be BBC Micro. These companies make use of chips on their devices that are manufactured by other companies who license these designs from ARM. So ARM is called a no-fab. So when you think about the ecosystem lab, and the reason why it's called an ecosystem lab, it's that the things that go into these labs come from ecosystem partners. And for example, the one in the Eastern Cape was made up of equipment from both Arduino and BBC Micro. Now, the ecosystem lab in South Africa was not within an academic institution. So students had to take themselves over to the CREATECHIVITY Hub to get hands-on with things. But it made it possible for them, especially if their schools didn't have any of these hardware, to go and touch and feel and play around with these things. And I can tell you, it's one thing to read about a microcontroller, to even use a simulator to run all of your code. So for instance, the BBC Microbit lets you do that. You can create all of your sketches and test how everything would work with a simulator on a computer without having the actual hardware. And I had done that until I got my hands on an actual BBC Microbit. And I like to tell people that the experience is completely different. You know, just holding it, feeling it vibrate in your hands, pushing those buttons, looking at those LEDs light up, hearing the sounds come out, it gives you a completely different experience. And I've seen people have a similar reaction to getting their hands on one of these boards. It's also the same thing with, when you hold the microcontrollers and you realize what the actual size is. It's one thing to read dimensions or specifications on a screen. It's another thing to hold something and realize, okay, this thing is really tiny. And I've had that reaction with, say, the Arduino Nuclear Vision, which is kind of thumbnail sized for me. Depends on, the size of your hands. Also the same reaction I had when I got my hands on the Xiao. Okay, so enough about ecosystem partners, but those are all ecosystem partners. Those are microcontrollers you will pick up that are ARM based, but they're not manufactured by ARM. But when ARM sets up an ecosystem lab, it brings all of these things together in one place. And so that's what's playing out in Ghana at the moment. So ARM has launched 5 of these ecosystem labs, and that's huge, particularly because it cuts across both public and private sector. So 3 of the labs are in academic institutions. There's one in Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. There's one in Academic City University, and there's a third one at the University of Cape Coast. Then there are 2 of them that are not in academic institutions. One of them is in a private place called the Maker's Place. And the Maker's Place, they have a model where they go out to schools, particularly primary schools, and they take their hardware with them and then they teach. So instead of relying on the schools to set up labs, because then you'd need to have a lot of hardware, and we've had hardware shortages in the very recent past. So getting hardware, isn't the easiest thing. So what they do is they go out, with their kits, they package them, and then they go to schools, and then they spend some time. The usual time that you would have for a subject, they would spend it with these kids, and the kids would get hands-on. And that's a really innovative solution to teaching kids on the African continent. And then the final lab is at the Office of Global Partnerships in the US State Department. Now, I haven't been there in person, so I can't speak to what access looks like, how you would access the place and things like that. But I will come back with additional information sometime soon. Okay, now talking about ecosystem partners, let's spend some time talking about Arduino, particularly because Arduinos are popular on the continent. When most people got started with Arduinos, they probably started with Arduino Uno, and that's probably what most people think about when they hear the name Arduino, or when they think about programming with an Arduino. But the Arduino ecosystem is massive, it's large, it's got things beyond the Uno and the Mega. It's got the Arduino Maker form factor, it's got the Arduino Nano form factor, it's got the Arduino Portenta family of microcontrollers, which have the same form factor as the Maker, but with more powerful microprocessors on them, and a few other pieces of hardware that Arduino has released most recently. But what I want to talk about now is something that Arduino trademarked, a name. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it sounds like CREATECHIVITY. And I'll just read out in quotes what they say that they're trying to accomplish. And they say that the goal is to ignite students' minds with classroom kits that will help them go from trying to learning to leading. And basically that's just saying, here's a roadmap to help you teach people at various levels. And this isn't specific to just one level, say like primary schools or grade schools or whatever. And there's quite a bit of content, especially if you go to the Arduino website, but they basically distilled the information or the advice down into 3 things depending on the level of your learners. So if you're dealing with learners at the grade school level, meaning that they're not yet at high school, then what you're really looking to utilize is the Arduino Education Kit. And that's because the Education Kit is packaged for schools and also for sharing. But they look at it from the perspective of a classroom. And then there's the Explore IoT Kit. And, the name is just what it sounds like, right? It's a kit that lets you get into the Internet of Things. So you do two things. On the one hand is you work with sensors, you create your circuits, and you take, readings, sensor readings. And then on the other hand is you take all of that data and you transmit it over the internet to the Arduino cloud. Now, the Arduino cloud itself is useful in that it will store your data, and it will even let you create dashboards to visualize your data. It will let you manage your things, that's what they're called there. But you're also able to make use of webhooks to get data off of the Arduino cloud and onto any other destination that you're interested in. So if you're huge on one particular cloud, or one particular, let's say, database storage service, or even something like Google Sheets, you can move your data from the Arduino cloud onto Google Sheets. So there's the Explore IoT Kit, and they see that being targeted at students in high schools. It will give them a suitable introduction. And then there's the Arduino Engineering Kit, and that's aimed at learners who are in college or university or any tertiary institution. So that's a summary of CREATECHIVITY. I'm not sure if that's exactly how they would pronounce it, but I hope you get the gist. So I just talked about the Arduino cloud, and prior to this time, the Arduino cloud has really been targeted at individual makers, as well as I'd say professionals or companies, that sort of thing. But now there's an Arduino cloud for schools or for education, if you would. And you would think about it from the perspective of saying, how do I teach a class full of students using physical computing? Now, typically in education, what you want to do is have a curriculum, have coursework that your learners should go through, but also have assignments and maybe even projects, and have them submit that back to you. Now, without a proper, let's say, learning management system, what you're going to end up doing is asking people to check their emails for assignments that you're sending to them, or you give them a URL and tell them to go do something somewhere. How do you administer tests, for example, online? How do you get them to submit their projects back to you? Are they emailing projects? Are they putting projects in some sort of shared folder? Well, you get the gist. Now, for regular education, things like Google Classroom have been handy in the past for people, and I've used Google Classroom myself. It's a wonderful platform. It's free. You can register students, give them a code, and they sign up. They have an app on their device, mobile device, or they can use the web browser. They can get in. Your course content is scheduled. You can have videos for learners to watch, tests for them to take, assignments for them to submit, check in. You can grade, they can view their grades. It's a wonderful platform. And BBC Microbit has something similar for physical computing. And now Arduino Education for Schools, Arduino Cloud for Schools brings the same thing. So you're able to integrate Google Classroom and teach physical computing. You give your learners access to connected projects and IoT. And I think you should go check it out if you work with learners at any level. Give it a try, and yeah, let me know what you think about it. Now, similar to the ARM ecosystem labs, Arduino has what's called the Inspiration Labs. And it's essentially the same objective. The only difference now is it's Arduino, so everything that goes into that lab is from Arduino. So you'll get Arduino boards, but they also provide hands-on training for instructors for that lab. So what I'm saying here is, if you would like your own ecosystem lab, whether or not you're an academic institution, Arduino has a solution that is called the Inspiration Lab. It's not one size fits all. So if you are interested in this, you'll have to talk to Arduino, and then they will ask you a few questions, find out what your needs are, what sort of learners you have and things like that. And then they'll give you a quote. But as part of the process of setting up the labs, they'll also train your people to operate the labs. The labs are not restricted to an academic institution. So even if you're a private sector entity, even a non-profit that works with people, wherever, and your objective is to teach physical computing or STEAM or STEM, give people a boost, help with, some of these societal development goals, then do check out the Arduino Inspiration Lab. So just go on their website and search for the Arduino Inspiration Labs, and you can get in touch with them and they will send you a quote. Talking about community, so last year, I was involved with the Embedded Systems Challenge. It hasn't come back this year yet because, there were so many learners last year that we're trying to sort out infrastructure that makes it easy to track each learner's progress and also provide tailored learning for the learners. So do be patient, and I'll get back to you with information on when that resumes. But while you're waiting, you can try your hands on other learning paths. So you could, for instance, get involved with Arduino certification, or you could check on edX for any physical computing courses that might interest you. I know that getting your hands on hardware could be a problem, but let's cross that bridge when we get there. Now, talking about events, on the 25th of this month, March 2023, Arduino is going to be holding Arduino Day. Last year in 2022, it was Arduino Week. And that's why I said last week here. It was Arduino Week, and there was a whole lot of content. A whole lot. They had so much to share that, they dedicated specific days to specific types of content. And there was just a whole lot. From my perspective, because it was mostly online, there were only two ways that you could go through all of that content in a week. In the past, if you were attending physical events, you would take time off work or off school or whatever it is that you do on a daily basis, and you would be at a particular location and you would be running around venues and attending and stuff. And then maybe it wouldn't have even taken a week, because then they would have just said, if you're interested in this track, go this way, and if you're interested in this other track, go that way. But it was online, and so it was streamed live, and it took an entire week, and I couldn't consume all of that content in 1 week because, you know, I didn't take time off work. But it was a lot. I'm still referring to content from that event even now. So this time around, they haven't announced a week-long event. They've announced a day-long event. But it's their 10th anniversary of holding Arduino Day. And so fingers crossed, it's March 25th. So mark that on your calendars and make sure you attend. Usually there are project announcements from users and fans. And you know, you'll want to keep your eye out for that. They also use this opportunity to announce new hardware, or maybe just go in depth on new hardware that they've released most recently. And yeah, I can tell you that in the last 12 months, they've released quite a number of new microcontrollers, even a PLC that they've released, and it's actually professional grade. I've seen reviews from a few individuals who have commended the PLC that came out from Arduino. Okay, let's talk about the Arduino Project Hub. And typically, when I've posted 1 or 2 projects to hackster.io that are Arduino specific, I've seen them appear on the Arduino Project Hub. But you can also post your projects directly on the Project Hub. And Arduino has started a project of the month where if you post the project directly on the Arduino Project Hub, and you don't use a company account, so you have to use your personal account, but every month they will pick out up to 3 projects that they find to be most innovative or informative or whatever. They've got their own criteria, list of criteria, so check out the site for that. But essentially, up to 3 projects can be shortlisted and they can win vouchers. And the vouchers are valid for use on the Arduino online store. And I tend to buy most of my Arduino hardware from the online store simply because A, you're sure that they're genuine, but B, I also find it to be most convenient. I do use a forwarding address, so I don't ship directly to anywhere in Africa from the store. I usually just, if I buy from the US, I ship to a forwarding address in the US, and the same thing with if I'm buying from Europe. But essentially, if you can win a voucher, it's really useful, right? Particularly because you don't have to deal with foreign exchange controls and things like that. So go check out the Arduino Project Hub. Lots of projects, useful projects there for learning if you're not posting anything, but also do feel free to post your projects directly on there and you get a chance. And the project of the month, as the name implies, is a monthly thing. So it's not something that just runs out, right? It's not like, oh, if I don't post a project in March or in April, that's the end of it. No, it's running. I don't know how long it's going to run for. They'll probably announce when they stop that, but hey, jump on the bandwagon when you can, right? So let's talk about TinyML, still related to Arduino. So Arduino released a library that they call the Speech Recognition Engine. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of it, but essentially the objective is to let you implement speech detection, or what we also call wake word detection. But it's not just wake words, but speech detection on some of their microcontrollers. As of the last time that I checked, 3 of the microcontrollers are explicitly supported for this library. So there's a version of the library for one of each of the 3 microcontrollers that are supported. And these are the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect, which interestingly was the microcontroller that I spent most of last year working with. Entry level, but really strong. It essentially has the same chip as the Raspberry Pi Pico, but it comes with a few onboard enhancements. So the Nano RP2040 Connect has an onboard microphone, which is obviously what is being used for this speech detection right now. But it also has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on board, which the original Pico didn't have. And then it also has an accelerometer on it. The only thing that it doesn't have is a camera, but again, it only has a dual-core Cortex M0 Plus processor on it, which isn't suitable for computer vision. The second board that they support is the Arduino Nano 33BLE Sense, which is the bigger brother of the RP2040 Connect. This time around, it has a Cortex M4 processor on it. It has the microphone. It has the camera as well that you can use for computer vision, not directly on board, but comes with the camera. And then Bluetooth, low energy Wi-Fi, and then sense for some environmental sensors that come on the microcontroller. And then on the third side is the Portenta H7. Now, you know that the Portenta family actually has 3. If you don't know, go check it out on the Arduino website, arduino.cc/pro, and just jump into the hardware menu and you'll find the Portenta family. So it's called the Portenta family. There's the H7, which is 3, the light, the connected, and then it's just called the H7, but that's the bigger brother. And then there's a new one launched last year again, which is the X8. I won't even talk about that. I interestingly haven't got my hands on the X8. Maybe I should make that a project for this year. And then, most recently they announced the Portenta C33, and that comes with a newer generation of the Cortex processors. Now, they haven't specifically said that the speech recognition engine will work on the C33 or the X8, but if you've got a H7, the speech recognition engine will work on it, as well as the BLE Sense and the RP2040. Okay, so if you've got any of those, go check out speech recognition engine. I did check it out and I posted one video, but I did something wrong in that video. The entire process is right. It's just how I was checking the speech recognition. So you're actually supposed to treat it the way that you treat any other home automation system, so the one from Amazon or the one from, Alphabet, where you're supposed to wake them up with their name and then give them an instruction. I wasn't doing that. So I noticed that, the Hey Arduino side of things for waking it up was working. But in my initial test, I didn't follow up with an instruction. So, I wasn't getting that hit. I did record a second video, but I haven't released it. Just had my hands busy, but I do promise to release it this month, before the end of the month, in which you'll actually see it working properly. So if you don't have one of these microcontrollers, then check my YouTube page for the video that shows you the process, the end-to-end process. But if you do have one of those microcontrollers, again, you can check the video to see the steps to recreate this experiment. Now, the speech recognition engine isn't free. You do get a trial license, and you need to license every single microcontroller that you want to run the speech recognition engine on. But they've promised that the process is really simple. You don't have to know anything about machine learning and stuff. There's a trial model, which is what I ran, but then you can also create your own model, train your own model. And the promise here is you don't need a lot of training data. So you don't need the the devices, the microcontrollers, to be trained specifically for your voice or your speech pattern. And I saw that when I deployed the model to the RP2040. So my first experiment was the RP2040. And I like to work with the RP2040 because it's the smallest microcontroller from Arduino. It's you call it the weakest, really. The Cortex M0 Plus is at the bottom of the instruction set architecture from ARM. So things like the M4, usually M4F with floating point arithmetic, are much more powerful. The Portenta H7 even has two. It has an M4 and an M7 processor put together. You can run multi-threaded applications and things like that. Anyways, so that's it on the speech recognition engine. Go check it out. And then in terms of hardware, two things have been on my radar between the end of January and now. The first one is from Raspberry Pi, the company that gives us the Raspberry Pi. And they've released the Pi Debug Probe. And essentially it's based on the Raspberry Pi Pico, and it helps you with software debug. That's really the long and short of it. So if you've been dealing with other microcontrollers or even the Raspberry Pi Pico itself, in the past, to program the Raspberry Pi Pico, certain types of functionality, especially if you're going to go through the debug pins, you needed a computer with physical pins on it. So essentially you needed like a Raspberry Pi that you would then connect DuPont cables between the Raspberry Pi and the Raspberry Pi Pico in order to be able to do certain levels of debugging, firmware updates and things like that. Now with the debug probe, you're able to essentially accomplish the same thing using the USB port of a standard computer. So Windows computer, Linux computer, Mac, that isn't running on a Raspberry Pi will help you, you can now get that same level of control. And the debug probe isn't limited to the Raspberry Pi Pico. So any ARM-based microcontroller with software debug can be programmed using the software debug probe. And then the second thing that came on my radar, and this is from Arduino now, is the Portenta C33. It was just announced about a week ago or so. I haven't even checked the site to see if it's listed for sale yet. I think the last time I checked, I had to join a wait list or something. So I haven't been notified that it's up on sale. Per the information from the website, the C33 slots in between your Arduino Maker ecosystem and the Portenta ecosystem. So the Arduino Maker, if you're not aware, runs a Cortex M0 processor, not the Plus, but the M0. So it's pretty entry level, basic, so to speak. It's really useful for prototyping. In fact, I've been working on a book that is based on the Arduino Maker. And they've got all sorts of Maker devices, the Maker with Wi-Fi, the Maker with a GSM module, which I recently found that has reached end of life, but no worries there. And the reason why some of those Maker modules have reached end of life is that you can replace them with a Portenta. Portenta is basically a drop-in replacement for an Arduino Maker, but it's much more powerful. So previously, the Portenta H7, M4 plus M7 microcontrollers, if you go from M0 to M4 plus M7, it's a lot of power. And Arduino is a business. I'm sure they do a lot of research. So they recently released the C33, which is based on the ARM Cortex M33, which is newer, but I do believe that it slots in terms of power below the combination of the M4 and M7, and it's probably cheaper. So the C33 is positioned as sitting between the Potenta family H7 and the Maker family. I do look forward to getting my hands on the C33, so as soon as I do, I will let you know. Okay, finally, I'll talk about events that are coming up this month that might interest you. I know this is coming out pretty late, it's almost the end of the month, but Embedded World is happening right now, if you're interested. And there's also, between the 20th and the 23rd, NVIDIA GTC. So if you're interested in the NVIDIA ecosystem, especially in their edge devices, or maybe even in their GPUs, you probably want to check it out. And then again on the 25th of March, we've got Arduino Day. And then between the 27th and the 29th of March, we've got the TinyML Summit. And finally, before I check out, I want to talk about a book that is on my reading list. I haven't picked it up, but I'm pretty excited about it. And one of the reasons why I haven't picked it up is just because I've had my hands full. But either ways, I think I'll just get it and put it up on the shelf, and then when I have a breather, I will go through it. But it's the book is titled AI at the Edge. It's from two engineers who work at Edge Impulse, Danny Situnayake and Jenny Plunkett. So you can go look for the book online, or you can check the Edge Impulse blog. There's a post there about the book. So if you're interested in TinyML, AI on embedded systems, things like that, then check out that book. It's the most recent arrival. You can also check out other TinyML books if you're interested and you haven't picked up any one of those. Do remember that the Arduino Nano 33 BLE Sense is not the only microcontroller that is able to run TinyML. All of the Potentas are able to run TinyML. I haven't tried TinyML on the Maker family. Maybe I'll just try and see what simple models might work on it. The M0 hasn't specifically been stated to have that capability, but the M0 Plus, or the RP2040 more correctly, has TinyML capabilities, and that RP2040 is what is in the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect. It's also in the Raspberry Pi Pico and the Pico Wireless, although those do not come with sensors on board. So if you want to do any TinyML, you're going to have to wire your sensors in a circuit and things like that. But the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect comes with some onboard sensors, the accelerometer and the gyroscope, as well as the microphone. Now, the Nano BLE Sense has been out of stock, but there's a revision 2. And the reason why it was out of stock was simply because they just couldn't get some of the components that go on that board. So they've had to switch over. So feel free to order a revision 2 if you care to, and give it a go. Like I said, some of the sensors would have changed, so you'll need to use some libraries that are different from what you will be seeing in the documentation. But if you do get your hands on it and you're having any difficulty, please reach out and I'll see what I can do in lending a hand. All right, that's all for this newsletter podcast. Thanks for listening, watching, whichever approach you used. I look forward to the next episode. Have a good day.